Reigning ACC Player of the Year, Isaiah Wong has entered the 23 NBA draft, and it means that Miami has lost the top two scorers off their first ever Final Four team. What does it mean for Jim Larrañaga's squad?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there, literally daily, all year round. I am your host today, Isaac Shade. We're going to be joined by some great guests, but I want to welcome you in and say thank you, especially to you everydayers, those of you who we've been talking about that join us literally every day. It's so fun to be together. Thank you for dialing in with us. And to that point, we just passed 800 subscribers on YouTube on Monday. We talked about it. Oh, I just grabbed a bug. What up? Fastest hand. Oh, I lost it. Fastest hands in the West. We talked about it on Monday, but we were just shy of 800 subscribers and we passed that threshold. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so fun to be together. So coming up today, we're going to discuss how Kansas is going to go about replacing Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick, their own top two scorers for Kansas, and Ellis is the most recent in a cavalcade of guards heading to Arkansas. But first, we got to talk about Isaiah Wong deciding to go to the NBA draft. Well, we already knew Jordan Miller was leaving Miami for the pros, but now the ACC Player of the Year and the Hurricanes' leading scorer, Isaiah Wong, has also declared for the 2023 NBA draft. In total, it means that Jim Larrañaga's top two scorers, who combined for 31.5 points last season, are off to the draft. To help me figure it out, sort through it all, Alex Dono, our guy from Locked On Canes, joins me now to talk about what it means for Miami and specifically for Isaiah Wong. And Dono, that's where I want to start, is the Isaiah Wong side of things. He is not a surefire NBA draft pick. There were some that speculated perhaps he would come back for another year. Is this the right move for Isaiah Wong?
I lean to yes. I lean to it being the right move. It's because I wonder how much higher he can raise his stock than where it is right now. I mean, coming off of, you mentioned, reigning ACC Player of the Year and a Final Four run, and he was the leading scorer on a team that did that. I think now Zay feels like he's kind of reached his ceiling in college. And he's got a history of doing his due diligence on this stuff because he did test the waters each of the last two off seasons for the NBA draft. And both of those times he determined it wasn't the right time for him. So I'd give him the benefit of the doubt this time. I think he probably figures, and I agree with you, it's not a guarantee he gets drafted or is a first rounder like everyone wants to be. But I think he probably, weighed the risks versus the benefits of it. And he figured it's going to be hard to raise his stock next year because, listen, for as much as I'd like to think Miami can repeat a Final Four run, that's not an easy thing to do. And as much as I'd like to think he can repeat an ACC Player of the Year type of season, that would be really difficult to capture either of those things, that kind of lightning in a bottle twice in a row. So I think he's making the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you gotta pull the trigger. I almost said pull the plug. That'd be a sad sign. Pull the trigger and make the move. So, Dono, on the Miami side of things, yes, you lose your top two scorers, and then you also lose your seventh and eighth scorers in Harlan Beverly and Anthony Walker. But outside of that, you bring back four of your top six. You're looking at guys like Norchad Omier and Wooga Poplar and some others. How do you think this move impacts Miami going forward? Are we going to see some life wallet dollars opening up again, or what are we looking at?
Well, it's definitely an opportunity I look at a couple of players who are candidates to lead Miami in scoring next year. And you have to see one or two of these guys blossom the same way Isaiah did. When he got his opportunity to step into that starring role for Miami, he seized that opportunity this past year. The guy that I'm most bullish on is Wooga Poplar, who, we saw start to really make an impact as a starter this past year. And I think he's the one who is kind of on that trajectory where he could really explode as a scorer next year. And he's going to have a lot more green lights, Isaac, to take shots and assert his will on games now that Isaiah is no longer there to be that number one option. I could see Wooga really stepping up. And, someone we watched drain a lot of threes and really came on kind of in the second half of the year was Nigel Pack. Pack is going to be back next year. So, hopefully he can be, because he was really, really good around February, March, and into the tournament run. Hopefully he has kind of a better start next year than he did this past season. And certainly not a guy who fills the same type of role, but Miami really needs Norchad Omier, who's back next year, to take even another step. I mean, of course, his defense and his rebounding and some clutch scoring were, big things that helped Miami this past season. He'll probably be asked to do a little bit more next year. So I think it all comes down to development and players really maturing, right? Because the same way, a couple years ago, when Isaiah Wong was a young player, you said, okay, we're not exactly sure what we have here. There's a lot of potential. Is he going to live up to it? He lived up to it for the most part. So now you need to see some of these names that I mentioned really step into that and live up to it next year.
It's interesting because, Miami had such a solid starting five all season. Outside of that fivesome, you had Bensley Joseph had 2 starts, Harlan Beverly had 1, and Anthony Walker had 1. So, Bensley Joseph outside of the starting 5 is the only guy that's left on the roster that had any starting experience. Do you project that he might move into that starting 5 along with Pack and Omier and Poplar?
I think that's a good, safe projection, because he's someone who's played a pretty big role on Jim Larrañaga's team before, and he's got that experience. He's got his rapport with his teammates. So I think that would make a lot of sense next year, because Jim Larrañaga values that. I mean, it's, Miami and Coach L, the places he's been, he's never been like a one and done type of guy, and you usually don't see new faces, with exceptions being transfer portal guys, of course, but you don't usually see a lot of new faces pick up big roles in the rotation. But I could certainly see someone like Bensley stepping into a big role.
Another part of that whole conversation is, at this point, Michael Nwako is the only incoming high school senior that will be a freshman next year. So you got to imagine there's going to be some active transfer portal movement for the Hurricanes. Dono, at this point, is there anybody that you're bullish on that the coaching staff has been talking to, or anybody that you're hopeful to land?
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that, because they're going to need to be super active, Isaac, because you mentioned Nwoko being the only guy, which is a little bit surprising given I would have hoped and thought that the momentum coming off a Final Four run would just create a little bit more buzz in the high school ranks. And, the transfer portal is an important thing, and I'm definitely going to be watching it closely in the coming days. Because there have been some rumors and reports about maybe Life Wallet not being as active,
Right.
with NIL this year. There's some rumors and buzz about what may be going on there. So we're going to kind of see how that goes. But it's also NIL is not the only thing in college basketball. Players are also going to gravitate towards programs they think can win. And I think Miami is still in that position where they should be one of the more competitive teams again in the ACC, if not in the entire country. So as far as specifics, I don't know. I got to dive a little bit deeper into that, but I could definitely see Miami being aggressive, because it goes back to what I was saying a couple of minutes ago. Coach L values experience. Like, he values players who have already been part of programs. You look at the big roles that Omier and Nigel Pack played this past season. They had big-time college basketball experience by the time they arrived in Miami. I think Coach L likes to have those guys who have already been battle-tested, right? He prefers that over giving big-time roles to players who are just coming out of high school. So for a guy like Nwoko, we may not really see what he can do maybe until the following season.
Especially because he's going to be hanging out behind Mr. Omier, backing him up. And you got to imagine, as you said, Dono, a program coming off an Elite Eight followed by a Final Four has to be attractive, plus a 2-time Final Four coach. I don't know about you, but I'd be headed to South Florida to play for Coach L.
And it's not a bad place to be either. I mean, I've lived in Miami most of my life, but it's by choice. I mean, it's wild horses couldn't drag me away from this place.
Well, we'll see what the Wild Horses can do to try to drag the ACC title away from the Canes next season. Alex, Dono, great work. Thanks for all you do, brother.
It's my pleasure, Isaac. Thank you so much. Great show.
Kansas is going to land Stanford transfer Harrison Ingram. No, they aren't. Yes, they are. No, they're not. I can't keep it straight. I need help. Well, hopefully, Locked On Jayhawks host Derek Johnson can help me sort through it all. We'll get to that in just a second, but first, this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on all the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So, friends, make sure you check out all the betting action of what's going on with Tuesday night's games. I guarantee you the Braves are going to go to San Diego and win because they're the best team you ever heard of. I'm just kidding. But they're my team, so I bet on them. Don't miss your chance to get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Well, here we are, thick in the middle of transfer portal season, and Derek Johnson and I kind of have been expecting to be talking about Harrison Ingram's visit to Lawrence going on literally right now as we're talking. But Derek, on Monday, we found out that Harrison Ingram's visit to Lawrence was going to be delayed by about 10 days due to some class scheduling conflicts. And, I think some people want to make that a bigger thing than it is. I don't think it's anything more than logistics. But we want to talk about this and look at what Kansas is going to be working to do to replace the likes of Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick. And so, folks, today here on Locked On College Basketball, we are joined by the host of Locked On Jayhawks, Mr. Derek Johnson. Derek, welcome in. Help us make sense of what to think of what's going on with Harrison Ingram.
I guess class still does matter at Stanford, apparently, is what to make sense of it. No,
Eggheads,
I think,
man.
Yeah.
Eggheads.
Yeah, right. I don't view it to be anything more than, what it is, just a rescheduling. Obviously, as you know, there are times when, a transfer recruit gets the visit rescheduled or gets it delayed or just gets it canceled, and it does mean something. It does mean something of, hey, maybe they have somebody else they like, or maybe the player is going to go somewhere else. In this case, I don't view that to be the situation. I think Kansas is still very interested in Harrison Ingram. I think Harrison Ingram is interested in KU. I think it's just, a scheduling conflict that happened to come up, and they'll just do the visit later than expected.
And I know for a fan base that's clamoring for news all the time, which is every fan base across America right now, frankly, in this new era that we live in, that delay is not ideal, especially coming out of a weekend where he just had several in-home visits with the likes of North Carolina, A&M, and Xavier, amongst others. And so Kansas fans, just patience. Things will continue to play out. Now, interestingly, on Monday, there's this whole news cycle that seemed to go together. But, Derek, we need to unpack why perhaps it didn't go together. Marcus Adams, who had been committed to Kansas for a while, class of 24, by the way, small forward, announced about a month ago that he was going to reclassify to 23. That was always on the table, always in the cards as a possibility. But back on March 19th, he announced that he would, and then he signed with Kansas on Monday. And so a lot of people seem to make some noise out of that it was like, oh, it's this sign that because of the reschedule with Harrison Ingram, because he signed with Kansas on Monday, that it seems like perhaps that's an either-or situation with Harrison Ingram and Marcus Adams Jr. Can you help make sense of this part of it?
Yeah, I think this is also something that, if these things did not happen in the same time span, we wouldn't be correlating anything together at all. Because yes, they could be playing the same position. I think Kansas ideally would like Harrison Ingram to come in and kind of play a lot of small ball four for them. Maybe he'd be playing a little bit on the three, but I think they'd prefer to play him at the four. And I think ideally Marcus Adams is being brought in for long term to be a four-man kind of Jalen Wilson type, as comes in as a small forward who's got good size at 6'7", 6'8", but can slide down to that four role in how they've been playing over the past several years under Bill Self. And so I guess you could view it that way, but I don't know. I think that with Marcus Adams, part of the recruitment and his commitment to KU, I think part of it was he wanted to reclassify the whole time. And I think that from the KU perspective, maybe they were a little hesitant on it at first, but they said, you know what? We think the kid is this good. Let's just take a risk with it. Let's do it. If he wants to reclassify, and that's what'll make the commitment work, then we'll make that happen. I don't think it precludes KU at all from going after Harrison Ingram. I think, from Marcus Adams' perspective, he wants to be a one and done. He's said that publicly, but That's like basically every freshman recruit ever, right? And we know that it doesn't always work out for those guys. Now, it might work out for Marcus Adams. He's certainly somebody who I have had a much harder time getting a proper read on from just talking to people who are more in the know in recruiting from the standpoint of like, how good is he going to be right away? Because he put up monstrous numbers at the high school level, but he was also playing at a maybe a little bit lower level, wasn't playing as much of the organized basketball in the AAU circuits and stuff as some other schools, to where we don't have a proper read. You watch some of his highlights, like he's dunking on like a 6'2" kid from some small school in Southern California. So he feels like a very high ceiling prospect, but also a prospect that he could come in right away and play 5-10 minutes a game, and that wouldn't shock you either. So from that standpoint, I don't think these two things are going to overlap in any way. That, you know, KU still has a lot of scholarships to go after guys with. They could have anywhere from really 2 to 4 scholarships, depending on what happens with a couple decisions here. They haven't landed any transfers yet. I know there's some Kansas fans who still are getting a little angsty about that. So I don't think these two things really have anything to do with each other. They just, it's more, you know, something that just happened to be on the schedule, because I think it was like a week or two ago, 10 days ago, that Marcus Adams said that he would be signing on this day. So that was already planned. And then the Harrison Ingram visit was scheduled after that was already planned, and now it gets delayed. So just kind of a weird thing that happened to work out in the schedule.
It's fun to get folks in a tizzy, even if it is accidentally circumstantial. I love to see it happen. And listen, you talked to Derek about trying to replace Jalen Wilson. And with both he and Grady Dick leaving, that's the top 2 scorers leaving for Bill Self. How does he bring this squad back together? Who becomes that leading scorer? Does Kevin McCullough come back, right? Like if you had to make a decision or a call on that, like right now in mid-April, who do you foresee stepping in to be that dude, that leading scorer to lead the Jayhawks next year?
Yes, I mean, the 2 starting pillars back are DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams, but they're not guys that you expect to be that leading scorer. They're more role players who fit certain areas of the game. And DeJuan might be one of the best point guards in the country next year, but he's not going to be like a go-to scoring option necessarily. I think they're going to be playing a little bit more 2 guards. You put on Marco Jackson in there. He should be exciting, the freshman recruit coming in. But again, do you really want to bank on a true freshman coming in being the leading scorer? Probably not. So it's kind of interesting, because I think you almost make the betting favorite. Whichever high-level transfer they bring on might be that guy. Now, Harrison Ingram, he's been a 10, 11 point per game scorer. I mean, the name that they're going after that's the white whale right now for really a lot of these top schools is Hunter Dickinson. If he comes in, he's the automatic guy that you would look to. But there's a lot that they lost on the wing with Jalen Wilson, Kevin McCullough, testing in the process right now. I would still lean Kevin's going to probably end up going pro, but I know KU wants him back. And obviously Grady Dick going. MJ Rice, who was your backup wing, he transferred out of the program. So, I mean, there's a lot of wing minutes to be had, and we don't really know who the starting 3 and starting 4 man is going to be. There's been some talk about KJ Adams maybe moving down the line to being more of a wing moving forward, as opposed to being a center, where he was kind of an undersized center this past season. And the big question is, when you lose those guys, like not just who's going to be your leading scorer, how good of a shooting team is this going to be? If you're starting KJ Adams next to, let's say, Ernest Uday, one of your returning centers, and Marco Jackson as a true freshman, I don't know that he's known for being a great shooter, and he's shooting in the low 30s. And DeJuan Harris can hit them on open set shots, but he's not creating threes. Whoever that other guy in there better be a knockdown shooter. And that's where the Nicholas Timberlake decision becomes interesting, with him just visiting UConn over the weekend. And he obviously visited North Carolina, then Kansas, then UConn. We'll see what that decision beholds. That would be a huge hit for Kansas just to have that 3-point shooting. I don't know that he's going to pick Kansas. He might not. It seems like a coin flip at this point. Yeah. But yeah, it really is up in the air with who that leading scorer is. If you're having to go with somebody right now, I guess it would be DeJuan Harris, just by nature of him being, on the team. But if you gave me a slot, like in betting odds, of a new player who's not currently on the roster leading the team in scoring over anybody currently on the roster, I'd probably take that.
Man, interesting stuff. That's part of I guess, the fun now of we have the offseason in college basketball. Does Nick Timberlake, where does he pick the Towson transfer you just talked about? We expect a decision from him this week some point. Hunter Dickinson sounds like it might be somewhat dependent on whether Oscar Tshiebwe comes back to Kentucky or not. All sorts of stuff in the air. Doesn't give any rest to Kansas fans, but I'll tell you what, Derek Johnson, it gives you something to talk about every day, and I know that makes you a happy man. We will wait to see if Kansas is indeed able to land Harrison Ingram as his recruitment plays on out, and got to get some shooting, as you talked about, especially with Dick and Jalen Wilson leaving the two most consistent outside threats last season. Derek, we'll keep tabs on it all. I'm sure we'll circle back around. Brother, thanks so much. Folks, make sure you follow Derek and Locked on Jayhawks anywhere you can find your podcasts. Apparently, for Arkansas coach Eric Musselman, there is no such thing as too many guards, because he is absolutely loading up on them. We'll talk about it in just a second. Well, as expected, on Monday, Louisville transfer Ellis commits to Arkansas and the Muss bus. And seriously, the Hogs are apparently going to try to roll out like 87 guards this year and maybe even play them all at the same time, because just one after another after another. Let me tell you about Ellis, and then we'll talk about this whole legitimately. It's like we tried to find every guard, and like they all have to go to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I don't think there's an option for them other than to go be there with the Razorbacks. So Ellis, 6'3" guard from Durham, North Carolina, didn't look to go back there to Duke or North Carolina, wound up coming to Arkansas. Had been at Louisville for the past 2 years, had played community college basketball before that. And listen, yes, Louisville was just absolutely awful and atrocious this year. One of the worst major conference teams of the 2000s. I mean, it really is a thing. But this dude himself is a walking bucket. 17.7 points a game last year, 4.4 assists, shot 41% from the field. Only 31.9% from three. That's not great, but he's better than that as a career three-point shooter. Had 2 games of 30 or more points just this past year, 2 games of 29 points additionally. So that's 4 games of 29 or more points, and had 13 total games this year of 20 plus points. Now, of course, part of that is he was playing for Louisville, and they're terrible, as we've already said. But all of that said, what I want to actually have right now was the conversation that we kind of got into a little bit on Monday's show that Andy and I talked about together is what? All these guards coming in. So let me give you the context, and then we'll unpack it a little more. He's already bringing in, Coach Musselman is, Bay Fall, who's a center, so we'll move him off to the side for now. But the other freshman coming in beside Fall is Layden Blocker, who is a top 25 point guard in the class of 23. He's 6'2", comes out of Wichita. They couldn't keep him there to play for the Shockers. Now, obviously, we know Arkansas is losing guards Anthony Black and Nick Smith Jr. to the draft. We wait on what Devo Davis is going to do, because he's in the draft right now, but could come back, and he is a guard. He's a combo guard. But coming in, you've got Blocker, not a shot blocker, Blocker the player. That's his surname, right? The guard we just talked about. But then you've got now with Ellis, 5 guards transferring to Arkansas. 5 guards coming there. Khalif Battle, a shooting guard from Temple. Jeremiah Davenport, a shooting guard coming from Cincinnati. Keon Menefield, a point guard coming from Washington, who, by the way, has 3 years of eligibility. Tremont Mark, we've talked about him last week on the show with, the host of Locked On Razorbacks, our brother John Neighbors. And then now Ellis coming in from Louisville. Tremont Mark, I don't remember if I said, is a point guard from Houston. So you've got these 5 guards. You've got also, we just talked about Blocker, and there's the possibility that Devo Davis might come back. Well, I don't know if you are aware of scholarship allocation in college basketball. You only get 13 of them. And right now, just not even like Davis coming back or who's staying on the roster, just based on Blocker coming in and these 5 transfers, 6 of Arkansas's 13 scholarships are entrusted right now to these guards. Make it 7 if Devo Davis comes back, plus who's already on the roster. So more than anything, to me, this tells you about what to expect if you visit Bud Walton Arena this upcoming season for a game. You're going to call the Hogs, and the Hogs are going to come running because all of them are guards, apparently. So when you come to Fayetteville next year, you had darn well better have your track shoes on and ready to go, because Coach Musselman, I think, might play an entire lineup of guards. Not really, but you know what I mean? It kind of feels that way. But here's something else we do need to be aware of, specifically with the 5 transfers to watch for. It's a lot of experience coming in, and that could be great, or it could be a struggle. Here's what I mean. If everyone buys in to whatever Coach Musselman is selling or what they're trying to do as a team, awesome. You got a great thing going. If everyone accepts the role given to them, which is one of the most important things on a basketball team, awesome. If everyone buys into that. But are they all going to? Because here's the potentially negative thing about all the experience coming in. Davenport, 61. This is not just games played. This is starts. Davenport, 61 starts in his career. Ellis, 41 starts in his career. Tremont Mark, 41 starts. Menefield, 21. Battle, 19. So those 5 incoming transfers have between them 183 total collegiate starts. They're not all going to be starting. So again, if everyone's in on the team, if everyone's in on whatever role I need to do to help this team, great. The Razorbacks are going to be in a great position. But not all 5 of those guys are going to start. At least one of them, if not more, is going to come off the bench. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. How does Coach Muss manage all that? Does he have to manage it all? You know, I mean, it could very well be that they're like, hey, I'm good with whatever I got to do and legitimately mean it. And if so, Arkansas is in great shape. But I would say, as we sit here today, middle April, Coach Musselman's ability to manage personalities, egos, self-esteem, all of that stuff is going to essentially determine the success of Arkansas next season. And then you got to keep in mind, too, how on earth does Blocker fit into all this as the freshman guard coming in? Like, is he willing to just take a back seat for a year? Is he willing to watch what's going on? Or is he so talented that he comes in and supplants, not necessarily supplants because they're coming in too, but jumps above some of these other guards that are coming in? And how do they handle that, the upperclassmen guards? We'll have to watch all of that. So, I mean, to me, you look at what's on this roster and it tells you clearly and plainly that more often than not, Coach Musselman's going to roll at least 3, if not 4 guard lineups and a big. And that, I mean, that could go very well because with who they've brought in, it doesn't seem like there's going to be many guard lineups like that can roll with that. And man, so going to be interesting. We will keep our eyes firmly peeled on Fayetteville, Arkansas, see what the Razorbacks are able to do when we get going next November. Friends, thanks for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen every day. You everydayers, man, thank you again for being with us. If you're not an everydayer, you should be. Come join us every day, even in the offseason. We're having great conversations. Coming up on tomorrow's show, Andy Patton will be back with you. Going to be talking some Baylor things. We know that Adam Flagler is now entering the NBA draft. So that means that entire 3-headed starting guard lineup, talking about guard lineups, Baylor's entire trio will be gone. None of the 3 of them will be in Waco. Not LJ Cryer, not Adam Flagler, and not Keontae George. So Andy will unpack that along with some other more college basketball news on Wednesday show. Please, friends, go make sure and subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and comment. As always, my apologies to the Lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.